Welcome to the Art Colony, a podcast about art and art history in Provincetown. My name is Gaston Lacombe. It's odd. Just when you think you know Provincetown, that you've been here long enough to figure out all of its secrets, this town has a way to spin you around to remind you that you just know squat. I discovered that a few years ago when my partner and I were invited at our neighbor's house for a Boxing Day party. We went over, and our neighbor's house was packed. There were maybe 50 people in there. And we did not know a single one of them. Until then, I had thought, well, Provincetown is a small town. Everyone knows everyone. But at that moment, I was reminded that really, I don't know anyone. And all these people had their own social networks, their own reasons for being there, and their own Provincetown stories, none of which I was familiar with. And this situation has happened to me multiple times since I started the podcast. I'm invited to events, and as I arrive, I realize that even if I've been here for a decade, I don't know anyone in the room. So we all still have a lot to learn about Provincetown. There are still hundreds of Provincetown stories that haven't been told and haven't been heard. And that's what brings us to today's podcast, Provincetown Stories. It's the title of a new book by our guest today, Mr. Russ Lopez. Hi, Russ.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome to the Art Colony.
It's great to be here.
I'm glad to have you over. You know what the first question is, right?
Hey.
Who is Russ Lopez?
Well, I grew up in California, and I moved to Boston to go to college, or grad school, I should say, and fell in love, and have lived on the East Coast and around here ever since. My first time in P-Town was in January of 1981.
Oh, that's a while ago.
And we're here year-round now. We've been here year-round for like the last 10, 15 years, though we still have a place in Boston and we go back and forth. So we're never here full-time, but we never not here full-time.
And you are an author.
Yes.
Describe what you work on. Do you do mostly books, articles? What is it that you write?
I do quite a lot of things. I've written 7 books. This is my first fiction book, but I've written 6 other books, textbooks, and even some other things. And then I'm also an editor. I edit a small literary magazine called Latine Lit, which is by and about short stories by and about Latinx people. And I'm also a publisher. I'm the head of a outfit called Shabbat Peninsula Press, which publishes about 6 books a year.
And have you always been a writer? Has that been your passion since your youth?
Well, I wanted to. I mean, I took, writing classes even when I was an undergraduate way back in the day. And so I've always wanted to. It's more of the time. It wasn't until I had gone back to school, gotten a doctorate, and started writing books, academic books, that I got really into writing. And then not just academic books, that I started writing history books for a more general audience. And then I wrote a gay and lesbian history of Boston and Provincetown called Hub of the Gay Universe.
Yeah, I saw that. The Hub of the Gay Universe, an LGBTQ history of Boston, Provincetown, and beyond. Tell us more about that book.
It was really taking it from the time of the Puritans and whatever. I wish there was more stuff on the natives before that time, but there's not a lot. And took it all the way up to the present. And, things like so many things happened here, the fight for marriage. It was actually a great blossoming of liberal acceptance, I should say, of lesbian gay people to a certain extent back around 1900 things. So it was a very influential part of the country. And since they call Boston the hub of the universe, I decided why not call it the book The Hub of the Gay Universe? Just to annoy people from New York.
Yeah. And when did you write that book?
That came out in, I believe, 2019.
Oh, so not too long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that inspired this.
Uh-huh.
Because when you write nonfiction, you have to document every last word, right? Who said that, when, right? And, people go after you like, well, no, that wasn't quite what happened, right? Or whatever. But when you write fiction, you have a little bit more freedom to talk about truths that aren't necessarily something that you can find somebody a citation back in the literature to support.
And is that where your education is, in history?
No, actually, it's even more bizarre than that. I was an environmental studies major as an undergrad at Stanford, California. I came to used to go to Harvard to get a master's in city planning, and then I got a doctorate in environmental epidemiology. But my first book was actually a history of architecture and health.
Uh-huh.
So it was really a history book of how art people have used ideas about health to influence how they design buildings. Things like indoor plumbing and windows and the design of neighborhoods and whatnots.
Yeah, I keep on finding these, underground historians in this town. Yeah, because I did multiple degrees in history, and I keep on meeting other people, and you didn't do the degrees, but you wrote the books. Yeah.
Well, in every class, right, they always had the 1 or 2 first sessions on history, and those are my favorite. So
Mhm.
that's, when you're a professor, you can write anything you want. So that's what I
Yeah.
did.
So this book, The Hub of the Gay Universe, is that a book that's easily available in the bookstores here in town or, online?
Yeah, it's available everywhere, everywhere from bookstores to Amazon.
Mhm.
We're just about revising the ebook version of it, so that will be out. But yeah, it's virtually anywhere you can buy books.
We're gonna be talking about your new book called Provincetown Stories, but first of all, you'll have to tell us your Provincetown story. You said you first came here in 1981. Tell us about how that happened and how it felt to be here at that time.
Well, it's funny growing up in California, I had never heard of Provincetown, and I'd heard of Fire Island, and I looked at a map. You take a map of the United States, and you see Boston, and you see. I knew Fire Island was someplace on Long Island, so it's about an inch away. And so people must go there all the time. You're from Boston, right? I had no idea what Fire Island was like. I had just no idea, right? Well, I get that I realized that no, it's nowhere close to New York City, really. I mean, it is, but it isn't. And Fire Island's even more inaccessible. And also, in my naivete, I didn't realize the weather here was so bad that people wouldn't go year round, right? But in any case, midway through my second year of grad school, I met this guy who was I won't use his name because I mean he was a lunatic, but extremely handsome. But
Aren't
just
they all?
yeah, they all. Yeah, actually, I ran into. I have a good friend who lives in Provincetown who knows me back from those days, and he goes, "Well, why don't you ever see?" Let's call him X. I go, well, actually, I'm friends with him on Facebook, but he was a lunatic. I mean, he was just you just never knew who was gonna show up, I mean, he was always nice, he was never violent or anything, but some days he would be extremely happy and other days depressed, and one, Friday, he shows up at my apartment, he goes, "We're going to Provincetown," and, it was, like, I think the 2nd or 3rd week of January, and, we came up here and we stayed, I think at the Gifford House, but I'm not sure, and, we spent the weekend here, and it was January, so things weren't really
Yeah,
open,
especially back then.
but it actually still was a great time, and
Yeah.
just we just went to, Herring Cove, and we just looked at the water for, like, an hour or 2 until we got too cold. We started worrying about carbon monoxide with the car heater. It was the '80s.
Mhm.
And I just fell in love with the place, and I've always come back as much as we can. I met my husband, in 1984. We've been together for almost 42 years, and he similarly loves Provincetown, and we kept coming here more and more, and sometime around after 2010, we started renting for the season, and then we would rent for the season and persuade the landlord to give us longer times, but then we were renting a place that was falling apart, and eventually the stove stopped working, and so we were complaining to some friends that, the apartment's kinda nice, a good location, but the stove doesn't work, and they go, "Will you just be adults and buy a place?" And we went, "Oh, I guess we could buy a place, couldn't we?" And we did, we bought it before I mean, it was expensive, but not as insane as it is now, it was before COVID. So we did, and every day we just thank ourselves that we're so lucky we can, be here because it's such a wonderful place. So we're not here full time anytime because there's always something. My husband travels a lot for work. We have our place in Boston still, and there's always something that pulls you, a concert or an art thing or whatever. So we're always leaving, but we're always come back here. If we're in the country, unless we go some kind of foreign travel, and we're not here more than 10 day, stretch of 10 days, we sort of make a point of coming back
Mhm.
all year round.
Yeah. And over these 4 decades, are there things that have changed dramatically in this town or things that that have improved dramatically? How would you describe, the town between then and now?
Well, certain things do seem the same. I mean, there's always been a drag show. There's always been, um, I think that's there seems to be more tourists than there used to be, and they seem to be, uh, things like the bachelorette parties, I think, are relatively new, I think also the, entertainers are actually nicer, um, believe it or not. I mean, I remember back in the day, there were a couple that were really, you have to say racist back in the '80s, and you'd go there, you just pray you wouldn't be singled out in the audience for being non-white, right? And there was one that even when they hired him to do an event, a political event in Boston, that set off a little brouhaha because he was also perceived as being anti-women. And I mean, that has really ended to making Provincetown a better place. Just everything's just so much more expensive, right?
Mhm.
I still find it amazingly expensive, right? And I mean, of course, all of life is expensive now, right? I mean, there's inflation everywhere, but I look at what the prices of in restaurants, and I know they need to charge what they need to do, and it's just so expensive. Now, when it was cheap, I had no money. So back, I remember telling somebody back in the day when it was $35 to spend a night here at one of the guest houses. Well, $35 was more money than I had, and plus, as explained about young people, you only get 2 weeks of vacation. So, I was having, relatives, getting married, friends getting married, you had to travel back for Christmas back in those days. So if you only have 2 weeks, I had 1 week I could spend in Provincetown during the summer, right? And that took all my money. It meant that, if we, got the last week of July, it meant that we didn't eat in August, right? Or, actually, we didn't eat before, so we'd be skinny enough to be here. But
It's
that was what it
important to
was like
plan.
when you're 23, right? 24, you want to come here. It's just took even when it was cheap, it took all of our money. And now I don't know what young people do. I just
Yeah.
find it frightening.
I think a lot of them, they just pile many, many people in one rental.
Yeah, yeah, actually, I did research for some of mine,
Yeah.
um, and the story called Twink Week, Independence Week, I actually interviewed some people, right? And it really is like that. 8 people in a two-bedroom, and they didn't have it wasn't an electronic entry, so only one person had it. They also thought Provincetown was so dangerous you needed to have your door locked. So they would one person would have the key, right? And everybody else had the file and all because they went out in little Speedos, and only one person had money and a credit card. So they all had to this group of 8 had to walk everywhere just because else they couldn't get a drink or they wouldn't be able to get home again. It was really hysterical talking to these people, but I guess that's what you do if you wanna be here.
Welcome back. A reminder to follow us on Instagram at The Art Colony Podcast. And also, if you want to support us, you can do so by going at buymeacoffee.com. Look for The Art Colony Podcast, and you can leave us a little tip to help support the podcast and keep us on the air. So, Russ, we have you here to talk about your new book, Provincetown Stories. So, first of all, what led you to write this book?
Again, there are truths, right? There are things that happen, and, you know, a lot of the stories grew like think of a grain of sand grown into a pearl. Some little incident happened somewhere, someplace, and you by imagination, it grew into this big thing, and they're almost like parables, right? And what I wanted people to do is 50 years from now, when they wanna picture what Provincetown is. I'm not an artist. I'm such a bad singer, there's a court order, I'm not allowed to sing in the shower, but I could write. So I wanted to create stories that when you read them, each one individually and then as a whole, when you look at them all together, this is what Provincetown was in, the late teens, early 20s of the century, right?
I like that you used the word parable. I think that's a great description of them because these are stories about Provincetown, but they're also slightly fictionalized, slightly magical also. They're not necessarily um, they're not necessarily relating true stories. Tell us more about that.
I guess that's partly because, I'm Mexican, right? And when you're Latino, right, the all-time influence is the author, Garcia Marquez. And Garcia Marquez is famous for what's called magical realism, right? He wrote, 100 Years of Solitude and Love in the Time of Cholera, these other books where, it's not, It's not fantasy, it's not science fiction, but yet things happen, right? And I gotta tell you, one thing about if you spend a lot of time in Provincetown, things just happen. Um, as you said, you could suddenly show up at a party and be 50 people you don't know, and how could there be 50 people in this tiny little town you don't know? Because there's some sort of magic in the air. And so I even thought about that. What makes there's some sort of magic that makes Provincetown, Provincetown. And so I even created a character, and when I've been talking with folks across the country about the book, they've all fallen in love with this one character, Luna, who I sort of, imagine is this immortal Cuban woman who moved to Provincetown in the 1890s and is responsible for everything in town. Sort of, if it wasn't for her, the tides wouldn't match up and there'd be chaos in the harbor kind of thing. And it's just sort of, in my mind, what is it that keeps this town together? There's some sort of magic glue. So it does affect almost every story. And whether there be, some of the stories are serious. This is one that deals with AIDS and whatnot. And some of them are just meant to be over the top funny. I wrote the one about called The Plaque about
Judy Garland.
Julie Garland, and what it does is it's to commemorate Judy Garland coming to Provincetown in 1971 and performing at the place called the Barn, which is sort of this big place, a Masonic place, big dance club. We won't go to the real name of it.
Yeah, you have a lot of places where you change the name, but we can still figure out what it is.
Yeah. Well, that's also because if you have the real name, then you have to describe them exactly.
Uh-huh.
And so there's one that's sort of based on the Old Colony tap called the Land's End tap. And I put all these things on the wall. Now, if I was describing the Old Colony tap, I would have had to go to one section and come and catalog it, right?
Mhm.
But if I'm doing the Land's End tap, the one in my mind, I can put anything on that wall I want. And that's how it shifts.
One thing that made me laugh about these locations, you called the gallery the Aegean Gallery,
Yeah.
and you said it blasts Frank Sinatra music all day long. I was like, I know exactly what gallery that is. That made me laugh a lot. But yeah, I interrupt your story. I interrupted your story about Luna. You were talking about, this character who's been keeping the town together.
Yeah, it's just sort of the magic she represents the magic of the town that somehow, some way, you get two people from Provincetown, you have three opinions.
Mhm.
Everybody's running around with their heads are cut off. But yet at the end of the day, this town is sort of well managed. I mean,
Yeah.
compared to, you read in the paper about some of the craziness that goes on up Cape, right? We have it kind of together here, despite ourselves, because we're all kind of a little bit off, right?
Mhm. Well,
That's
that's
what I
what
love
makes
about
us
the town.
special.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you just have to go to town meeting and see how special that is. And your book is actually stories. It's not necessarily written as a novel.
No.
It's a lot of short stories, but there's also a thread that links all of them together. When you read, you have some characters that return and some locations that return, but they're all sort of independent, separate little stories.
Right. Yeah, I wanted them to be, in a sense, it's a beach read. I'm actually working on a novel now that that takes a couple characters and expands on them, and it will be one story throughout the whole, for the whole novel. And of course, a lot of the minor characters will come and recur, but it really is sort of a more established thing. But I wanted something again, I wanted to build something by pieces, by, I guess think of it like, a painter will have, layers of paint and then washes over things and somehow create a whole portrait of something. And this is the same way. You read one story, it gives you a little insight, but as you read more and more of them, and you could stop any time, but I prefer you to read them all. By the end of it, you're going like, wow, that is the town.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and as I was reading it, it took me a little while to figure out this magical aspect of it.
Mhm.
But then as I was reading it, I really felt that is part of the story. That is part of the allure of Provincetown. That is something's a little bit off here, and we can't really say what it is, but we like it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So you brought us a few samples to read. Do you want to read the first one?
Yeah, the first one is simply, again, I was trying to get so that people could understand the town. And to me, one of the things is when you first come into the town, and most people drive, and no matter whether it's one time or 1,000 times, I think you come over that hill and you see the harbor there, as I actually had a bout of cancer back in 2018, and I had a very miserable winter with chemo and radiation and all these things. And that was actually the longest I've been away from Provincetown probably since 2010 because I had to be in Boston for my daily treatments and everything else. But when it was all over and we drove back into P Town and you come over that hill, you see the town. And so, anyway, I was trying to convey that. And this is the very first story, very first paragraph is called Welcome to Provincetown. You begin to feel excitement pulsing through your body when your car makes it to the Orleans Rotary, though you are still 40 minutes from Provincetown. For the next half hour, your enthusiasm steadily builds so that by the time you spot the sign for Shore Road in Truro, the last town before your destination, you are straining against the constraints of your seatbelt in anticipation of what's to come. After another mile or so, a pine forest, you hold your breath, a big smile on your face. You finally pass that old, familiar red sauce Italian restaurant on your right, drive over another rise, and suddenly there it is, the $1 billion spectacle of Cape Cod Bay, the Pilgrim Monument, and Provincetown stretched out before you. Between the steely water that calls you to swim in its joyous expanse, the bold line of romantically named flower cottages at, along the beach that remind you that memories have been made here for decades, and the deep blue sky that stretches 1,000 miles to the heavens, you are looking at Cape Cod at its impressive best. Whether this is your first visit or the thousandth time you've driven to P-Town, this view never fails to amaze you.
I have a story about that view. This is about 10 years ago. I had fallen in love with someone in Provincetown, and I was living in DC back then, and I'd come back to Provincetown as often as possible, and often I'd leave after work, and from DC, it's about a 10-hour drive, so I'd get here in the middle of the night, like 2, 3 a.m., and I was speeding. I was speeding in that stretch of road in Truro, and just as I got to the view, just as I got to the space, the spot where I can see Provincetown in the distance, I saw police lights,
Oh.
and I had to stop there, and they gave me a big fine, and I was like, I was almost there, and I could just see it. I could just reach it. So whenever I go over that little hill and I see Provincetown, I'm reminded of that moment, and I slow down.
Again, it's sort of our, the Emerald City, right? It's
Yeah.
like you get there and there it is that it's just so beautiful. And I went there a week or two ago, it was foggy. We felt cheated because you couldn't see a thing, right? But it is that view when you come over. Just wonderful.
Russ, in the book, you also have a few chapters that I really enjoyed. It's a chapter where you tell a story, but you interrupt it repeatedly with other little stories through it. You have these little chapters that are just peppered all the way through. One of them is about the dance of Saint Bonaventure, or the feast of Saint Bonaventure. Um, when I was reading this, I was thinking, what is this? But can you tell us more about that?
Well, I decided to make up a fake holiday, because why not, right?
Uh-huh.
And I actually wouldn't bad if it became a real holiday. So if all of you out there, what it is, it's the Thursday before 4th of July week. 4th of July weekend, and there's a whole formula to this. And what it represents, Saint Bonaventure's a fake saint, and in my book, he was something from the 900s in France, in rural France, and he worked at a monastery with an incredibly dull job. Like, he had a diary, today we wormed the apple field, tomorrow we're going to clean the stables. I mean, just dull as could be, but devoting his life to religious prayer and whatnot. Well, the Vikings come in and they sack the monastery looking for gold, and because these monks had taken a vow of charity, of whatever, poverty,
Poverty, yeah.
they had no money, so they got furious. They slaughtered all the monks. So they found the head of Saint Bonaventure next to his diary, which is um, full of doll stuff. So the French decided he was going to be the patron saint of the night before all hell breaks loose, which was perfect, right, for a Thursday night before the season begins.
Hmm.
So I have it how it was brought by the Portuguese into the faith and Roman anyway. So what it is that it's a annual thing, and what the story is what people in Provincetown do the night before the season starts. So there's a guy who works at a bookstore, and he's the only person who's really I did built a character around. I could tell people his name was Richard Carey. He used to work at East End Books, and now he works at the Crown Point or something. But anyway, he's the only person who's really 100,000% written after somebody, because I promised him he'd be in the book. Um, And anyway, so in this story, his name was Brendan, but what he does is he hates tourists and customers because they mess up his bookstore. Like he uses a straight edge to make sure all the books perfectly line up. And the fact of the matter is, this is the last night. His bookstore is going to be neat because the tourists will come in and always be messing up the books. And there's other folks. There's a woman who found sobriety 3 years before on St. Bonaventure Day, and so she always celebrates that day as a day of another year of her being sober. There is actually there's a piano player who has been playing in Provincetown and suddenly has been offered a job in Las Vegas at the most famous nightclub of all. So he ends up praying to St. Bonaventure. What job should he take? Should he leave Provincetown or should he stay? And, for Brendan, he prays to St. Bonaventure for sanity during the tourist season. And, the woman who found sobriety actually does a little prayer of thanks to St. Bonaventure because she feels that he's her personal saint that helped her, beat alcohol, at least for a day at a time. So it's a
Well,
lot of
I think
fun.
we should implement that as a real festival because then on St. Bonaventure, we have to make a long conga line
Right?
on Commercial Street, right? I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
other thing. There's a silly little dance I had them all do. They do basically a conga line, right?
yeah.
Um, and everybody can't figure out where it started. For a lot of people, Harry Kemp is a character that keeps reoccurring
He
only
does, yeah.
because everybody just makes up so much stories about him anyway, right? So people think that maybe Harry Kemp started that because he was caught with his arms around the wife of a jealous man, right?
Well, what's going to happen now, I'm sure, is that people are going to read your book. And now all summer long, I'm going to have people coming to my gallery and saying, when is that dance happening? I read something about a festival. I am telling you, it's going to happen.
Well, I also made up an indoor swimming pool, an auditorium. So I'm waiting for people to start asking where's the
Well,
auditorium?
I'm all for that.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be
let's
good.
do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Because I have to drive to East Ham to use the pool. So I'd rather have a pool right here. Another chapter you have like that, which is a description, and then it's interspersed with a lot of little stories, is called Scenes from Commercial Street. I really enjoyed that chapter. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, yeah, and those are actually it's another one of these long, well, fairly long for the book, stories that intersperses descriptions of the street with little vignettes of
That's
what
the word,
happened.
vignettes. Yeah.
And most of them really are. Yeah, I talked about the greatest sand with the pearl around them. Most of them really are sort of based upon something. So um, there's one of the first one. There's a group of 4 people from Montreal, and they're all dressed up to go partying, and they're asking for drugs for these other people who say, "Well, we don't do drugs, but have a nice night, right?" And then they find one of them lying on the sidewalk in front of Spiritus, basically, 2 hours later with only one shoe on. Look, he's looking up at the sky, right? And that's actually based upon the word 4 of them. But there was the one guy who was actually dressed the same way. In the book, he's dressed in a shirt with that's all these gold discs about the size of a quarter. And that actually, I swear, one time we were walking down the street and he asked us where the party was and where he could get drugs. And then 2 hours later, we saw him lying on the street. So I kind of package it and make it bigger than it was into a whole vignette, but that really what really
It's
is.
not all fiction.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was reading that chapter, it was like if I was walking down Commercial Street and just getting snippets of conversations from the people I was passing, which happens in real life. You walk down Commercial Street, you just get, one sentence in somebody else's life that enters your head, and then you keep on moving. That's what it felt like when I left.
Yeah, well,
that
one time
chapter.
we were walking down the street and some woman was yelling at her husband for, flirting with she said waitress. So I was very careful to say in the book waitress, not server, right? And I saw you looking at that waitress. And like, you know, that could be a whole novel. You think about just that one line, right? You
Mhm.
hear that, but I made a little vignette, right? What was going on, and it turns out that the real problem was that the guy's having an affair back home, not in P Town, but it also illustrates something, right? One of the things I say is that it's hard to keep your passions locked up in this town, right? Emotions leak out whether you want them to or not, and that's one of the good things about the town, I guess.
And that leads me to another point I had about your book. Your book is very, very frank and direct about sexuality in it.
Mhm.
You don't go around the fact that this is a party town. This is a town full of hedonism. that people come here for sexual pleasure of all kinds,
Right.
and they're all represented in there. Can you talk more about that aspect of the book?
Well, I actually struggled with it
Uh-huh.
because if I tell the world what goes on here, is that gonna destroy it? So but,
Well, it also might scare people away.
right, scare people away, right? Yeah, or you're right, but I don't wanna, I don't wanna be all, everything was fun and games until that one guy had to write the book, and now then I don't know, the UN comes in or the federal government's gonna come in and put a stop to it all or something, right? But it is part of the town, right? I mean, it's sex sells, right? And even if something's not going on, people still talk about it, right? And so y- to blot it out was to lie. So I try to make it just sort of matter of fact that, well, because it is matter of fact, right? You walk down the street, there's two people, making out to the point where there's like it's slippery around them, right? So and everyone just keeps on walking, right?
Yeah.
No one stops it, right? So, you can't hide it. But then again, I didn't want it to make it a sex book either. I guess
Yeah.
maybe I should.
Well,
Sex
that's a
sells,
good way
right?
it's a good way of describing it, matter of fact, because
Yeah.
you read this book and it's part of the experience. It's not something you stop and dwell on. It's just something that's part of the experience, and you keep on going and have pizza, you know?
Right, exactly.
It's very matter of fact.
Well, some people are having pizza, and a few yards away, some people are doing who knows what, right?
Yeah. And you already touched on this a little bit, but that's something I had in my notes also about the interaction between the races and the different ethnicities here in town. That you had talked about, a performer. You had talked about somebody who wanted to go see a performer, and in the book you say, "Well, considering you're Latino, maybe you shouldn't go see this one."
Well,
Do you think this has changed a lot in town, or do you think that's something that still happens? I know there's one performer in this town that I don't go see anymore because I feel that performer is a little bit too um, edgy when it comes to picking on people of different races and different backgrounds. But maybe you want to comment more about that?
it does still happen, but it's not like it used to be almost ubiquitous. I don't wanna say anything nasty about the history of drag in Boston, but it used to be and I was, when I first came here, it was a first of all, a lot of the clubs were so racist you couldn't get into them. I remember somebody talking about a place in Boston back in the '80s, and they went, "Was it was a blast." I go, "I wouldn't know, I couldn't get in." So, I'm too dark, right? So, racism is a fact of life, and it still permeates, we have a society that's not devoid of racism, so it permeates in. And there are people who think things are funny that the objects of those things aren't. Don't feel comfortable. So there is still an informal network that will tell you that if you ask, people will give advice. Well, people give advice anyway, right? Go see her, not her, right? Because they think this year her show's better than this, than And it's the same thing because well, you can go, but be ready, kind of thing. So that still does happen. There are still we're part of the world, so it might be jarring to folks who think Provincetown is, paradise on earth. But I think to Black people, Latino people, etc., I think it's not surprising at all, and you just sort of expect it. And a town of this size, because this gets pretty big, there's bound to be things that make people uncomfortable in a bad way. It could be uncomfortable in a good way too, but
Yeah,
a
in a
bad
good way too.
way.
So, Provincetown Stories, the book, it's already launched. It's already available.
Came out March 1st.
March 1st. Oh yes, it's already available. And I got it on my iPad, so it's
Ah,
available electronically as well.
yes.
I love to read a book on my iPad. But you have a whole bunch of activities coming up to promote the book.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've been all across the country, LA, Palm Springs, New Orleans, you name it. And receptionist was wonderful. People really do love Provincetown across the country. So that's great. But now we're concentrating, now that the weather's warming up, we're concentrating on here. So I have events at both bookstores in town. I also have events at the Truro Library. And looks like I'll be at the Provincetown Book Festival as well. All those things are on my website called russlopez.com. So you could, if you really want to follow me, you can You could stalk me very easily by looking at my events page on my
You were
website.
lucky to get that name .com.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
RUSSLOPEZ, right?
right,
I'm
right.
Canadian, I say Z. .com. Um, so you will have readings here in town,
Yes,
presentations,
yes.
and when's the book festival again?
The last weekend in September, they moved it out a week
Oh,
because
okay. Yeah. And then after that, what are you working on something else? Is there something else in the pipeline coming up?
yeah, I'm working on a novel
Oh, yeah,
about
you said that
Provincetown.
already. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's like, there's a whole lot of stuff I still have to say. I thought about another collection of short stories that I've written, maybe 5 or 6 more, but, this is something about having that long form where you can really stretch your legs, in terms of words or whatever, and you can stuff anything into a novel. So, it's gonna take me a while, but, I have quite enjoyed it, and because I love my characters and I love the town.
Mhm.
So
Oh, you can tell that by reading the book. It's a very, enchanting read. And, this brings us to your second sample.
yeah, one of the themes I like to actually, look at, I watch this podcast all the time, and one of the things that always comes up is why Provincetown is so special in terms of it as an arts colony. And so, it is very I read you the very first chapter. These are the very last paragraphs in the book. It's about a couple who were big part of the '80s art scene here. They're both bisexual. She was an artist that painted these portraits of folks, and he was a guy who wrote all sorts of novels. That one of which was I think won the Booker Prize or something. Rather, I kind of got crazy with them. Anyway, but now they're in their late '80s, and their daughter, who grew up in Provincetown, hated the town, and it's finally convinced them that they have to leave. And so this is them talking to an assistant who has come to take all their papers and remaining artwork and put them in the museum. So, and they're feeling very bad, but here it is. They're talking about why Provincetown, right? Um, Being different has always been the point of Provincetown, William added, disappointed he would never write a book containing what the assistant was telling them. In the old days, this was Helltown. Then the modern party began during World War One and hasn't stopped since. Some try to deny all this. A lot of people like to whitewash the folks who founded the famous Provincetown Theater, for example, making them out to be solid citizens with bland morality. But they were carrying on with each other and anyone who consented. Our esteemed mother of arts Provincetown, who owned the wharf where the plays were produced, Mary Heaton Vorse, was married several times and had countless lovers. That same summer, as painter Marsden Hartley helped design the sets for the theater's first production, he was out cruising Commercial Street for tricks. These early days have always been essential to the history of the town, Sarah added, speaking to Julie, though her daughter wasn't there. Julie's the daughter wants to get him on to Provincetown. It's not just the sex and partying. It's Provincetown's encouragement of all unconventional behaviors and it's that inspire its artists and dreamers. This is one of the few spots on the planet where people could do whatever they want, change their names, reject their assigned gender, dress however they like, and so forth without judgment. From this freedom, creativity flows. We are doing our best to continue these traditions, the assistant tried to reassure Sarah. The museum and art center are still hives of activity, and there are more than a dozen other groups and venues going strong. Despite high housing costs, the lure of cheaper places, and who knows what other barriers, Provincetown continues to attract artists and poets, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. And while we may not be able to match you old timers in terms of quantity of ingested substances, be confident that the social scene is just as lively as when you got here. Sarah's love of Provincetown took over. The productivity of our artists has always depended on the wild scenes in the streets. The parties, the sex, the boozy nights, and the drugs made our senses quiver and grow. In the middle of an affair or while watching someone else's goings on, you gain insights on human nature you couldn't see otherwise. Our art, our writing, our plays, and our poetry all come from this place. Every time you see someone wearing odd clothing, acting unconventional, or just strutting around with an I don't care attitude, you are looking at a person contributing to P Town's creativity. You can't have this art scene without anything else, without everything else. They're intricately bound together.
Amen.
It's like, some tourist comes in here and wears, high heels and a bustier, they're not creating any art or great art or any regional art, right? But the fact of the matter is that you can come here and if if you wanna do a painting of a man or a woman or an elephant in high heels with a bustier and that whatever, you have that right because you've seen it on the street, you have that inspiration.
Mhm.
So I really do think that's what kept Provincetown. I don't wanna use the because it's weird because I don't like to sound like, keep Austin weird as
Mhm.
other cities like that, but it's what kept Provincetown creative is that it lets people do whatever they think is right at the moment.
Yeah. I think one of the parts of the magic of Provincetown is that somehow Provincetown gives permission.
Yes.
Some in other places, you feel you have limitations, you have responsibilities, but in Provincetown, you are given permission to do whatever you want and be whoever you want.
And people will applaud you if they like it.
Yeah. So, if people want to buy Provincetown Stories, it's available in all the local bookstores. It's available online. uh,
And
Anywhere else?
it is available hardback, paperback, an audiobook, and an ebook. It is available at every bookstore, Amazon, Barnes& and Nobles, bookshop.org, and virtually any place that sells books, you can get it.
You're going global,
Yeah, yeah.
and your website is russlopez.com.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, before we let you go, Russ, we're gonna do our speed round. I need a drum roll or something. Okay. Do you prefer Commercial Street in January or in July?
July.
July? Yeah.
Even though I wanna get a machete sometimes to get through the street, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, July.
I'm a big fan of the off season. Would you prefer being here during Fair Week or Carnival?
Carnival.
Carnival?
Yeah.
Why?
Oh, just because it's more the local thing, Bear Week and Independence Week are really becoming international even. But Carnival is really still us, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's a whole story called Carnival Week. But it's really just made up by P-Town. It has no real function. It has no real purpose in life. And people do really the local people really do think all year round what their costume's gonna be. So I love it. But
Yeah.
Bear Week's fun too.
Yeah. Those were two chapters in your book, Fair
Yeah.
Week and Carnival. And yeah, I always say about Carnival, I don't like crowds and I hate costumes, but I love Carnival. It's a strange thing. I look forward to it, but in other situations, I can't stand costumes. Well, for me, anyways.
Right.
And I avoid crowds, but not for Carnival. I'm in it. Okay. Next question. Also, somehow linked to your book. Do you choose Judy Garland or Cher?
Oh my god. Cher turned 80 this year. Is that crazy? Um, oh, I think it would have to be Judy Garland.
Yeah.
I mean, just, you know, that mixture that of tragedy and beautiful, beautiful voice. The that texture, I guess it is, that depth, you know? Well, Cher is real,
Yeah.
if I could have lunch with Cher, I think my life would be complete. But Judy Garland.
Well, you can go with Thirsty Burlington.
That's
Yeah.
true, it's true.
But yeah, the Judy Garland story, the twist at the end really made me
Mm.
laugh out loud. That was a lot of fun. Okay, there's two chapters in the book that I'm gonna say you have to choose. If you were to go on a date, would you go on 101 dates or a day at the beach?
Oh, boy.
Those are two chapters in your book, 101 dates and a day at the beach.
I, uh, I'd probably do the 101
Oh
dates.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
you're a romantic?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just, it just there's that special someone, right? I mean, you can go through 100 people and not find that right person, but then that 101st person, and you're in love forever. And I think I've been very lucky to be with my husband for 42 years,
Uh-huh.
and I only wish I have 42 more years, so I'm a romantic.
It's funny because in my head I was thinking 101 dates with the same person.
Oh, oh,
You
oh,
were
oh.
thinking
Oh,
101 dates
it's
with different
different people.
people.
Right, right, right,
Oh,
right, right.
interesting.
Yeah, it's a whole other story, but actually my husband and I only had one date. It went ended terribly. We've never been on another date since.
Oh,
But that's a whole other story. Like, it's way too long for this.
okay. That's your other novel.
Yeah.
Last question. Okay, on that date, do you prefer going to a fancy restaurant or a picnic in nature?
It's always been my fantasy to find a quiet little place in the, somewhere in the seashore that, I wouldn't wanna disturb anything, right? But somehow walk in, have a picnic in the sort of the scrub land with the dunes and everything else, and then walk out of it. So, I think
Mhm.
I would have to go with the dunes.
It would have to be a day without wind.
Yeah, I know. Without bugs.
Yeah, and
not too-
somehow far away from the ticks.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could, if you go in the fall, you can just pick your own cranberries there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love doing that. Well, Russ, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for contacting me and telling me about your book, and I hope a lot of people pick it up. As we said, you can pick up Provincetown Stories at all the local bookstores and also find it online. So thank you very much.
And thank you for having me.
My pleasure, and thank you all for joining us.